please pronounce your name correctly for me?
My name is Carol Milne. Rhymes with kiln, but some people pronounce kiln kill, so.
Do they?
Yeah, it's a kind of a British thing, but.
Huh, interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have crossed paths almost because we both went to the University of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
What brought you to the University of Iowa? Because you're not a writer, which they're known for their writing workshop.
No, my husband is from Iowa, and we moved back from Seattle to Iowa so I could go to grad school. And then I decided to go to the University of Iowa because it was in-state tuition. It really wasn't the best way to choose a school, but it wasn't terrible. I was doing a master's in sculpture, and the head of the sculpture program at that time was a macho jerk, really terrible man. But my fellow students were great. The other classes were great. I learned a lot about things I wasn't expecting to learn about. And ended up, after 4 semesters, a group of us went to the dean and said, this guy is awful. He's abusive and nasty. And he had tenure, so they couldn't fire him. So we put together all these safety violations, and he was reprimanded. So they wouldn't let him couldn't cast metal at the school. So at this time I had quit, but I heard the next year he's taking his students out to a barn to cast metal, which was probably even less safe. But anyway, sculpture does tend to attract the macho jerks of the art world, and he was one of them.
It sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they had lovely facilities. I remember being very envious of their sculpture facility. It was a beautiful place.
Mm-hmm. And fortunately, the undergraduate professor, when I was there, David Jokinen, was fabulous. I mean, he was a wonderful human being, and I learned a lot from him. So it wasn't a total waste of time.
Yeah, I had a horrible teacher while I was there. She was an adjunct, and I have no idea what her name was. She gave us this assignment, and I worked my butt off for this thing because I'm a horrible illustrator. I can't draw to save my life. And of course, it was a drawing class. So I'm trying to draw, and I put so much effort into this thing, and I got it really to the point that I thought it was really lovely. I put it up in class for the critique, and she goes, "Yeah, that's wrong." And I was like, wrong? How could you use the word wrong for anything? So I ended up complaining to the dean, and it turns out that she had other people complain about, basically, it sounds so stupid and subtle, but vocabulary issues where she sort of told students, you're doing that wrong. And I'm like, it's not wrong. It's just not necessarily what you think is right.
Right. Well, art is one of those, it's not something that there's a right or a wrong. There really isn't. It's just a lot of it's preference, and
it's debatable. I mean, there are some right and wrong things within the, as far as craftsmanship and techniques and things like this. But when she said the piece was wrong, I'm just like, fuck you. So I got her
So you
fired.
didn't last there either, huh?
I finished my degree there. So
good
yeah,
for
it was
you.
fine.
Yeah.
I just remember having to take an art history class with some professor, I can't remember his name, that loved Etruscan mirrors, and it was his specialty. We were doing an art history course, and he went on for 2 weeks of an art history lecture just on Etruscan mirrors.
Well, it's good he's passionate about something, right? But
yeah,
we all have our...
Yeah, the other art history professor had a specialization in pre-Columbian art, which was actually much more fascinating. So anyways, enough griping about the University of Iowa. So going back to you, how did you become creative in the first place? I'm always interested, how people get created. So your parents, your schooling, what led you down the creative path in the first place?
Boy, I don't know. I've always been a maker. I learned through using my hands. I suppose we moved a lot when I was a kid. We lived at 18 different addresses in my first 18 years. So
that's a lot.
It's a lot. My dad was in the oil industry. He was a troubleshooter, engineer. Once a plant was built, he would go in and figure out, get it running. And, initially every 9 months we're somewhere else. Being an introvert, I think I didn't have a consistent friend group growing up. And my mom is super creative. She's not an artist per se, but she's a very great improviser with life. Whatever's thrown her way, she just makes it work, right? Moving 18 times, she was the homemaker who had to set up every time we moved. We didn't bring a lot of stuff with us. So she'd go to garage sales and buy furniture and refinish things and pull stuff together. So there was a lot of making in my family, making things.
Just to be clear, this was in Canada, correct?
No, I was born in Canada, but at least 10 of those years we lived in the States. My sister was born in Germany. We lived in Texas and Puerto Rico and Iowa and New Jersey and New York City. And a lot of places, a lot of moving. We moved back to Canada when I was probably 12, and I finished high school and in Canada and college.
And now you're in Seattle, correct?
Yes. Been in Seattle a long time. I love
Good,
Seattle.
I got one thing right. That's good. So what drew you to Seattle? It seems like there's a very strong glass culture in Seattle for some odd reason.
There is. We thank Dale Chihuly for that. But I wasn't into glass when I first moved here. I took landscape architecture in school. And in my senior year, I really became more interested in earthworks and kinetic art and sculpture in the landscape. I met my husband at a landscape architecture conference in Iowa. But he's not a landscape architect. He was visiting a friend. The friend moved to Seattle, and we moved to Seattle to be near his friend. And also, there's a lot of art. Seattle was one of the first places to have 1% for the arts as part of the government program. That brought us here, and we just stayed, except for a brief interlude when I went back to grad school and then came back. I do love Seattle. So this is where I, introduced into glass. We were driving along the highway, and there was an open house at Pilchuck Glass School, and we stopped in and was pretty captivated.
That's it. Just driving along the road, walked into an open house, found a new career.
Well, I did, but I didn't, because I couldn't afford to take classes at Pilchuck. It was pretty expensive even back then. And I thought, I'm not going to get a scholarship. So I didn't really start doing glass for another 10 years after I was introduced to it. It's probably good, because if I had started when I first saw it, I would have been blowing glass and I would have been making different things,
Right. Which leads to the obvious question of you are, by your own words, according to your website, let me find the right words, the lone pioneer of the field of knitted glass.
It's funny, isn't it? It makes me laugh.
I can't tell if it's being self-deprecating or being really proud and sincere.
I like that edge that you don't know. I'm a very big fan of wordplay and puns, and I like that you maybe don't know which. That's good. It's funny what, you make plans to do this and do that, and then, life doesn't always bring you where you expected. But what I found interesting is that I was a big knitter as a kid, and still am, but that came back and I incorporated it into glass in a way that I wouldn't have if I hadn't had that background, But I love to knit, and I love what happens when you knit with glass. You see more of the structure, and it's not the soft color. You're laughing. Okay, what are you laughing about?
I'm laughing at the fact that you said, when you knit with glass, I will not kid you. When I pictured this, so without looking into more of your process and all this, I was thinking knit with glass. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought you took hot rods and literally knit with the hot rods. And I'm just like, oh no, it's cast glass. Okay. Totally different.
I know it's much more boring. Cast glass is this really long and stupid and labor intensive, but I've always thought I need to get some kind of PR shot that makes it look like I'm actually knitting with the molten rods, because that's what most people think, right? They don't understand about glass. And I just think that's funny.
Well, as an ironic thing, could that even be done?
Not easily, because glass kind of goes from molten, where it's really runny, to stiff that you can't move it really quickly. And some glass has a longer working life, but when you watch somebody blowing glass, they heat it up, they move it a little bit, they heat it up, they move it a little bit, and you'd have to do something like that. And it would be really difficult. And especially because knitting involves pulling pieces through loops. To do that with hot glass, I think probably nearly impossible.
I agree. And that's why I was very surprised. I was like, how is she doing this? Because like that seems impossible. My mother knits. So like I know enough about knitting to be dangerous, but that's about it.
Yeah. The process is, you're just pulling loops through loops. So I actually knit in wax. I have this long stringy wax and I make a mold around the wax and melt the wax out of the mold, and the mold goes in a kiln, and I melt glass into the space and break the mold apart. It's, the way they do bronze casting, except everything's one off with this. It's kind of stupid, but I'm kind of obsessed. I mean, you got to be obsessed to do stupid things.
You've got to be obsessed sort of to just be in the arts world, because like if you're not loving what you do, you kind of should get out of the industry.
That's really true. I mean, my daughters are both really creative, and I think one of them at least would have liked me to push her more to go into art, but I don't think anybody can push you into going into art, and they shouldn't. If you're not really compelled to make things and you can't not make things, then there's a lot easier ways to make a living or to live your life,
Yes, being creative in the arts is one of the more anxiety ridden and sort of just self-conscious like careers I could ever imagine. I mean, and I would say that in like being an actor, a writer, a musician, a visual artist, doesn't matter. Any of those fields is like they are not for the faint of heart or the soft-skinned.
No, definitely not. I mean, I wouldn't change things, but then, I have a husband with a job, which has really helped me, because most people won't tell you that, but you really need a patron, or you need to be independently wealthy. You need some other way to make money that's going to sustain you. I mean, I feel for a lot of artists, because there's so many books out there that say, how to market yourself and make it in the art world. And it's not that easy. It's a stupid career as a business. Really, it isn't a business. I mean, you can try to make it one, and you can have a website and try to sell stuff, but, that doesn't mean you're going to sell enough to feed yourself. It's
Well, you do have a website where you have things for sale, and you work with galleries.
I do.
And I always wonder, because like there's always these debates of like, should you as an artist create your own e-shop, or should you not? Should you put prices out in the world? Should you not? Like there are all these like, and some people will say, absolutely do this. And then another next person will say, under no circumstances should you do that thing. Like, there's no consistency to it, and it drives me nuts. Like, there's so many things in the arts world that I wish had some sense of consistency.
You're right. And I didn't have prices for the longest time. And then I thought, well, this is insane. If people don't know how much it is, some people are afraid to ask. I think what it is, the art market, it really isn't regulated. So you go to big galleries in New York and they're selling stuff for millions of dollars. Well, that's the price tag they're showing you. Maybe there's all these other deals that people are getting discounts, and it's just so, I just hate that. I just want to put the price on, and you either want it or you don't want it. And my work is expensive, but my work takes a lot of time. If I'm going to give it away, I'll give it away. If I'm going to sell it, I'm going to sell it for what I have put into it.
I looked at the prices, and I wouldn't say the prices are horribly expensive. I think you're pretty moderately priced, but of course I'm also very bad with scale. So maybe I'm getting the scale wrong. Maybe they're much larger than I think they are, or smaller than I think they are. But I think your prices are mid level. Like, they're not outrageous.
I just have started putting more, especially since COVID. I price my stuff the same as a gallery would. So if a gallery sells it, I only get half. I'm probably not making enough money in that case. But, how do you judge what, to me, really it's about communicating and finding an audience. And you don't do that by making your work in a little room and keeping your work in the little room. You have to get your work out into the world. And at least that's my opinion. I mean, some people make art as navel gazing. And for me, it's communication.
And you've done a pretty good job of it. You have your work in a number of collections and museums, and you've done some shows in museums and things like this. So like you've done a pretty good job of placing them around in the sort of the right places.
Yeah, I don't know if that's intentional. It just happened that way. You just have to keep doing it, right? I mean, artists are the most sensitive people in the world. And yet, if you don't keep putting yourself out there and getting rejected, you're never going to get accepted. I'm just cracking you up, aren't I? Nobody can hear you laugh, but I can see you laughing.
I intentionally do this like quiet laugh because I don't want to interrupt the audio quality. So yes. Yeah, I mean, it's true that we are like, it's funny, like I'm overly sensitive in many aspects of my life, and I'm totally insensitive in other parts of my life. You know, when it comes to my art, I'm super sensitive. Like while I'm still making it and all that, but like as soon as I have decided that I'm proud of it for whatever reason and like it's out in public, then I'm not sensitive about it anymore because like I feel strong about it, strong enough to put it out into the world. But prior to that, studio visits or people seeing things half done, I'm always like, oh God, please don't give me feedback on this shit because it's nowhere near done. Like just no.
Yeah, it's tough. I think, anytime I go look at art galleries, maybe I like 1% of the work that's out there. So I figure if 99% of the people who see my work don't respond to it, they're not my people. And I have to accept that not everyone is going to be my people. I mean, knitting really is I've put myself in this old lady category.
Yeah, your work is very niche. I mean, it's a combination of
That's a nice
glass
way.
arts. Thank you. It's a combination of glass arts, which is niche, and fiber arts / specifically knitting, which is also very niche. So you have like this super niche. I mean, you're at the top of your field in that niche thing for sure.
Yeah, I guess it's very strange, but you got to embrace that, right? I started making glass work thinking that my people would be glass people. And really, my people are middle-aged women who knit. And I think that's great because if the people who respond to your work, if you're too snobby to say, I don't like you, then you've just right there, you've cut off your audience. If your audience isn't who you expect they are, you need to embrace that and say, oh, this is interesting. These are my people. And I didn't know that. And that's okay. We're not all going to be the top of the tier who gets the fancy art collectors loving us. And that's okay.
Well, and that's an interesting dilemma because like I always wonder about like, how do you find, like, not just how do you find them, but like, where do you, so for you as a niche, knitting / glass artist, like where are your collectors? So like what's the geographical location of people? So is it Europe? Is it Asia? Is it Americas?
Well, mostly the US, but all over. I mean, I had a gallery in Belgium for a while. She closed because of COVID. So I have collectors in Europe. The internet really makes it possible for us to reach an audience all over the place. And that is amazing. If you're willing to put yourself out there, it doesn't matter what you're making. You're going to find somebody who responds to your work. That's actually pretty fabulous. Doesn't mean they're going to buy it, but if they respond to it, we don't really have a way. If every time somebody looked at an artist's website, they paid a penny, then artists probably would be doing pretty well. But we don't have a way for somebody to appreciate you in a minor way, except maybe Patreon, but that's they look at it and they love it, but they can't afford it. So they walk away. And a lot of the stuff that you love, you're never going to buy, but I think it's valuable for the world to have it. Right. So there's just not really a funding mechanism to keep artists going, except, just their internal drive.
It's a sad state of affairs. I mean, admittedly, it's worse in America and it's a little bit better in Europe. In Europe, there's a lot of funding, like government or corporation or EU or any of those kinds of things. In America, it's just like the middle class has sort of gone away. The granting and support patronage system has very much become like, high-end people are always getting opportunities, and then there's low-end sort of local $500 things, and there's very little in the middle as far as like just being able to being working artist kind of grants.
Yeah. And
And that's
Canada's
very
is better.
unfortunate. Is Canada? I would imagine Canada would be better.
I think it's like, it's the, I mean, that's how the US work ethic is, right? It's all competition, work. Yes, hard, the hard people are going to rise to the top. The fact of the matter is, as an artist, you're probably not going to make any money for 20 years. So what happens in that meantime? You might get a teaching gig, but they're few and far between now. We're pumping out so many MFAs that there's not a lot of opportunity for teaching. So,
Well, it's not even it's not just the opportunities for teaching. It's the opportunities for teaching that, like, most of the, like, quote unquote, like, good ones, you would have to literally pick up your whole life and move to that other place. So, like, maybe they're either not in a desirable place or they're in a very expensive place. And so, like, one way or another, they're not really, while the job is beneficial, but there might be other criteria around it that are not super beneficial to your career. Because, like, you're in Seattle, great location. You probably have a beautiful setup there. And so, like, the idea of going to teach somewhere, like, you'd have to leave everything you've built there and rebuild it somewhere else. And, like, ugh.
Well, I teach workshops, but a workshop, even if the workshop is a week, it's really 3 weeks, because it takes me a week to prepare and I have to travel, and then I'm there for a week and then I come back and I have to get back into things. And teaching is, if you do it well, it takes as much energy as making art. So then you're like, most jobs are either full-time or nothing. And a lot of people end up just teaching and never making art again. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it is a dilemma. If you set out wanting to make art and you're passionate about it, but you have to feed yourself and you get a job that keeps you from doing, vicious circle.
Just to be clear, in case you didn't know, I'm a professor also.
Oh, okay. So but hey, maybe your podcast is your art now.
It's an extension of both my teaching and my art. So it's a little bit of both. I'm starting to come to the point where I'm getting to calling this podcast my research.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I thought that was a good word for it. Very academic, very intellectual. Makes me sound makes me sound a little bit more pompous.
Well, there's a lot of things people don't talk about in art. They don't talk about the money. They don't talk about making a living. They don't talk about, what if you don't sell stuff? This is, like you said, people being so reluctant to post prices. Artists don't want to think of art as a commodity, but in fact, it is a commodity. And if you don't put a price on it, somebody else is going to.
Well, once it's completed and out in the world, it's a commodity. As long as it's sort of still in your studio and you're still creating it, you're still thinking about it, it's not a commodity. But once it's been completed and handed out into the world, it becomes a commodity, whether we like it or not. Because, like, even installation arts or even performance arts that are then, filmed, and then that film is then sold or whatever. Like, so, like, once you put it out into the world, it's a commodity, whether we like it or not. And a lot of us don't accept that. I'm perfectly fine with it. I come from a photography background. My father did painting and other kinds of things like this. So, like, I'm good with the idea of creating a beautiful object and then putting it up for exhibition and sale. Like, I'm all for that.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I don't think any of us start out thinking we're entrepreneurs, right? We make something, and you just make another thing because you love it or you want to express ideas. And then, especially if you're a sculptor, it's like, holy mackerel, I have so much work here. What am I going to do with it? So you gotta.
Well, that's a huge question that I always have for all sculptors is like, so what do you do about the storage for all this?
Oh my God. Yeah. I have a basement full of stuff, and glass especially you need to be careful about it. So I build wooden crates with 3 inches of foam around all my artwork. So even though my individual pieces are not very big, the crates are huge. And I have some stuff I don't have crates for. And let's just hope there isn't an earthquake in Seattle anytime soon, because I have a lot of glass in my studio and a lot of glass up high. And I don't know. It's a dilemma.
I don't believe you're on a fault line there. I think you're safe. Are you on a fault line?
Seattle? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Definitely. We're due for a big one. Let's hope no
okay.
time soon. I've only experienced a few small earthquakes, but uh, you can't live your life being worried about the future too much.
No, not really. But let's get back to the money thing. I love
Yeah.
talking about money. It's like when I was a kid, my parents used to always say, like, you get 10 bankers together, they talk about art. You get 10 artists together, they talk about money.
hmm Yeah, it's true. It's a tough. I mean, I just want to make work, right? I don't really want to think about the money. But initially, my husband and I, because I didn't have a career per se, he could work. We had an agreement that until the kids, we have two daughters, until they went to school, that I would stay home with them because it didn't make sense for me to make nothing and pay for childcare. That's another beef. There's so many women artists, especially who don't have children. A lot of it has to do with childcare. It's so ridiculously expensive in this country that if you want to work and you have children, most women don't. They just will say, I'm not going to have children because I can't afford it.
What ends up being basically a wash because the amount of money you'll
Yeah.
earn by having a job
Right.
is the same that you'll pay somebody to do childcare. And so you end up
Right.
earning nothing except
Right.
that you just had the freedom to get out of the house for a little while.
Right. Right. Which, that's a valuable thing.
In hindsight, now
Yeah.
with COVID, the idea of getting out of the house is amazing.
Yeah, I haven't minded it that much, which is strange. I'm glad my studio's at home. I just kept working. It helps I'm an introvert. So it wasn't that different, except my daughter and my husband and my daughter's boyfriend all work from home now. So that's been an adjustment.
So going back to the money stuff, so like you basically have the luxury of having a household where basically you're supported in some way. I mean, part of the thing is like it's no matter how much money we put in, we're never technically going to get it all back because we put so much time and testing and all this other stuff. And like, unless you start selling for, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're never going to recoup all the time and energy and resources you put in. I mean, it is possible to do that, but generally most of us are not going to. I mean, like the last series I produced, it took me 3 years worth of testing before I even got to the point that I was ready to produce the work. And then another 3 years of producing the work. It's 6 years worth of work. I mean, yeah, it was part-time because I had a teaching job the whole time. So like, I get it, but like, it's a really tough industry when it comes to that kind of stuff. But you've done it pretty well, it seems like, because you've got galleries that represent you. And then you also do workshops and you've got other sort of sources of income, which seems like the model that's come up these days, which is basically, a diverse model.
Well, that's the way you have to do it, right? I think I look really good on paper.
You do, yeah.
When our kids were little, we had bought a house. We bought the ugly house, but it had a little house in the backyard, like 300 square feet. So when they were small, I remodeled that, and it started out as a bed and breakfast, and now it's just a regular rental. But whatever I made from that was what I allowed myself to spend on my art. So even when I wasn't making money, I had this, say, $500 a month that could go to materials. So even though my husband doesn't, never thinks of me as a drain on our family resources or anything, in my mind, I was at least not spending more than I was bringing in. And, I'm making some money now, but, I couldn't afford to have a studio in Seattle on the money. My best year, I netted $50,000. No, gross, not net, gross, before taxes, before paying for materials. And, so I'm maybe making $1 an hour, when it comes down to it. But it's not about the money. To me, it's just about staying above water so I'm not sinking our family and still able to make what I love to make. And it's hard because I think there are too many people saying, oh, you can make it as an artist. And yet without giving I didn't have any business training in art school. The teachers didn't know how to make a living as an artist. So that's why they were teaching. Then they're saying, oh, go out there. You're going to sell your work in this gallery and, you're going to be we can't all be, represented by David Swimmer or whoever, those fancy names.
And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is basically like I sat back and I'm like, you know what? None of my professors prepared me for the reality of being an artist. Like as you said, like basically most professors aren't professional artists. Like they're professional professors.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't knock them for that because I do that. But, but I mean, they don't know how the art world works. And so I sat back and I was just like, well, how can I figure out how the art world works? So if I'm going to be teaching the next generation of artists, I should have some understanding of how the art world works. And what better way to do that than talk to people that are in the art world? So therefore, I created this podcast. So that's part of the foundation of this, is like, if I'm going to be teaching, I better be teaching contemporary knowledge about this instead of what my teachers taught me 20 years ago, because it's changed.
And there's a lot, art is sold by advertising, and there's a lot of advertising out there that, you get a magazine and it has this fancy artwork on the front and you look at it and, oh, it's like $300,000. And so there you think, ka-ching, that guy's making money. But just because he's in the magazine doesn't mean he's sold that piece or ever will sell that piece. He's just got somebody willing to back him to try to promote him, and they're promoting themselves at the same time. We tend to see the advertising and think, oh, that could be me. And maybe it could be.
Well, I worked at an art gallery in San Francisco, and we ran our advertisements in, I forget what it was, Art News or Art Forum. I can't remember. I think it was Art News. And every single time we ran an ad, the piece that was used in the ad was sold within a week.
Wow.
So it actually does
advertising
work.
Works then.
Well, this is also 20 years ago, so I'm not sure it still works, but it did work. Like it did drum up enough interest, and basically it was always a questionable thing, because the advertisement. I remember the advertisements were some ridiculous amount, like $10,000 for a full page ad, and it was always like, if the artist's work was at least $10,000 retail, then it was worth doing the ad. But if the artist was less expensive than that, then it wasn't even worth running the ad, because you couldn't even recoup your costs for the ad. So we didn't even advertise everybody's works, because quite honestly, we couldn't recoup the money from every artist.
Right.
So it's always a gamble, like all these kinds of things. And even these days with doing Facebook advertisements or any of the other online advertisements, at this point, there's still a lot of a gamble.
Well, Facebook at least is inexpensive gamble, and you can target the audience.
Yeah, but it can get expensive if you do it all year.
Right. That's true. Yeah, it's a tough thing, but I think that good on paper, but that doesn't mean there's money attached, right?
I look excellent on paper. I look like a super duper academic professional. Shit. I was the judge on a National Geographic reality competition television show. I mean, come on.
Ooh, that's fantastic. I was in Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Wow. I did not see that on your resume. What?
Yeah.
What for? Wait, what? I didn't see that.
Oh, for the knitted glass. Oh, this was a few years ago. They contacted me and I thought, this is hilarious, but it's not what I would expect. It's just funny. Sometimes weird things come up and you just have to say yes to the world, right? Even if it's weird.
Oh, yeah. Just to be clear, that National Geographic TV show that I was a judge on, it was actually in Arabic. So I was dubbed.
That's cool.
It is cool. I don't know what what they said in Arabic. I'm just hoping they translated me correctly. I have no idea. So
that's funny.
Yeah. It was a fun experience. Which is, what I hope my life generally is lots of fun experiences and good stories.
Life is weird, right? You set out having lofty goals, and then you might not end up there, but you just have to take it as it comes and be creative with what life sends you, and just keep approaching your life as creatively as you do your work, right? It's all one.
Well, I have a question about that. So like when you were starting off, so you started off as a landscape architect? No, landscape.
Well,
Yes.
I have a degree in landscape architecture. Yeah.
Landscape architecture. But okay, so when you entered the arts field, let's call it, did you have some aspirational goals? Because like when I was a kid, I say this like it was so long ago, 20 years ago. I had these aspirational sort of ideas when I said, "Oh, I'm going to be an artist and I'm going to do this and this is going to be the pinnacle of my career." And now, 20 some odd years later, I'm sort of like, "Nah, nope. I just want to make enough money, have enough time to just do whatever the fuck I want to do and not worry about these things." So I've changed my sort of aspirational goals in my career, and I'm wondering if that's something that other people experience as well.
So I didn't set out to be an artist because there were artists in my family. My aunt was an artist, a painter, and my great grandmother was a painter. And, in the 70s, smart women were not encouraged to go into art. You're smart, you got to be a doctor or be an engineer. So landscape architecture was kind of an in-between for me, right? It was like, oh, it's not an engineer. Although if I'd gone into music, my dad would have been happy with that, but he really wanted me to be an engineer. And looking back, I think, wow, I could have used that training because I'm building things now that I don't have the structural understanding, anyway. So I really actively avoided being an artist. And then it just got to a point where I realized every project I do is a creative, I can't just build a floor, it's got to be something weird that I'm learning about materials. I can't. So probably when I was about 30 was when I said, you're an artist, you got to just suck it up and live with whatever comes your way. So I haven't had any specific career goals. I guess I'd like to maybe have work in the Corning Museum of Glass because that would mean that I've achieved something in the glass world so that people who work with the same materials as I do appreciate it. But as far as other, I'm not mainstream. I mean, I'm never going to be, I just am not, I'm the oddball weirdo and I always have been. I'm not going to be picked up by the Whitney or, some fancy creative, I just don't see myself in that. So I've never even really aspired to it. I just want to keep making work and learning about the world, through what I'm doing and finding an audience. Yeah.
It's Corning and Whitney. Those are your aspirational goals. Got it.
Whitney, that's like, no way.
You never know, man. One year they just might get a curator for the biennial who happens to love like the mix of fine art and craft, and you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's like, whatever. You probably, maybe you don't deal with this as much, but the whole debate between craft and art.
I was literally about to ask you that.
I mean, that just drives me crazy. I am usually put in the craft category. It is important to me that work is well crafted, but it's not enough. I think that whole idea came when Greenberg tried to make art special. So conceptual art made it special so he could sell it for more money. But I don't really care. I want to make stuff that's well crafted, and whether you call it art or not, that's, you're putting it in your own little category, and I don't really care.
Well, that debate and conversation I find but because the problem is that I think that terms are not specific enough, because in art there's art, then there, of course there's time periods, postmodernist, contemporary, whatever, and then there's fine art, which is then like a subgenre of art, but then there's craft, which sometimes falls into kitsch or knickknacks as a what that word means, and then sometimes it means craftsmanship or well crafted, and so there's too many variations, and none of these words are specific enough. I mean, because like I have a position. Everybody has their own personal opinion on the position of like craft and art. But I think the difference is like craftsmanship. Like my position is basically craft is oftentimes more utilitarian-ish, and then it can be elevated to the level of an art.
Mm-hmm.
but it's not necessarily that. So like, like somebody who makes a coffee mug, that coffee mug can be a craft piece. It could also be an art piece, but it depends on how far it's been pushed, if it's been elevated either through concept or craftsmanship.
Right. But then there's a lot of art that has great conceptual ideas, but it's so poorly executed that I just think, I don't have much. I mean, the ideas are important to me, but I really think it's important to make things well. I mean, that's my bias. It's definitely a bias. It's interesting to me also that a lot of what is considered craft was traditionally women's work because, and now a lot of that is becoming like fiber art is really got big resurgence now that you see a lot of the quilts from Alabama. I mean, there's a lot of fiber art is now being accepted in the art world, which is I'm glad to see that because it was traditionally done in the home, embroidery or needlepoint or knitting, and was traditionally functional. That functional aspect just because it's functional doesn't mean it's not worthy of attention and actually creatively made, right?
Oh, there's this piece. I had this lady, God, how long ago did I know her? 15 years ago. And she had this amazing art collection. Insane. Like she loves ceramic stuff and like literally every like counter surface in her entire house, even in drawers that she kept closed, she still had stuff like everywhere. And she had this stunning rocking chair that she had custom made for her. Cost her like $2,500 for this custom. And it was absolutely exquisite to look at and even better to sit in. Absolutely amazing. Like I would personally like, though it is, under the auspices of this conversation, a craft, it was an exquisite piece of art because like I loved both looking at it as well as sitting in it. Like it was gorgeous. And I've never forgotten that piece. It was so good.
Maloff, probably Sam Maloff. He did some incredible
It was in
woodwork.
Ohio. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
Oh, such a good rocking chair. Oh, God. I mean, like I grew up with like Heller, designed dishware and things like this. Like, so like beautiful design, I think is amazing as well as anything else. But it's the fact that even that, I just gave it another term. So now there's craft versus design versus art. Like, God, I wish we could come up.
It is, I think we all want to establish a hierarchy, right? And I think they can all coexist. And I think if you have a hierarchy, though, maybe you can charge more if you're in the fine art category. I mean, I don't know.
It's really interesting how that arbitrary hierarchy equates to value. So like theoretically, we should pay more for a painting on a wall than a beautifully crafted set of dishware.
Mm-hmm.
Even though probably the same amount of time, possibly even more time went into the dishware as far as effort and design than the piece of art, but yet we value it differently. That sense of how we value, we'll call it objects, since that's of course what we both do. So objects is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a one of a kind thing, right? If it's one of a kind, it has more value in a way. Like you have the only one. I don't know, people buy Porsches and they're not one of a kind.
It's true.
They're mass produced.
But like I recently started fetishizing on handmade knives, like kitchen knives.
Oh yeah.
God, they're gorgeous. And they're all one of a kind, like not mass produced. Like, oh, so beautiful.
Yeah, there's a couple people on Instagram with fancy handles. And yeah, I've seen those.
So beautiful. So beautiful. But anyways, all right, let's keep enough of our absurd fetishizations. So how has COVID sort of affected you? Because of course you do workshops, or you did workshops. Now I know you do them online and all this kind of stuff. So like, how has that like been a good thing or a bad thing? Because of course I know the idea of doing online workshops has the opportunity to potentially reach a wider audience.
Yeah, I actually haven't done any teaching online. I've done some presentations and lectures, and that's been great. But, doing a lecture online, you don't get the feedback, right? So when you tell a joke and nobody laughs, it's like, ah.
It
So
is hard.
that's been hard. I don't like not having the feedback. I miss teaching, but I don't miss it that much. Mostly I was traveling to teach. So I've gone to gone to Istanbul and New Zealand. I mean, that was fabulous because I could travel and teach and at the same time. And I was slated to maybe go to Amsterdam, but that got postponed at least for a while. I don't know if I'll go now. But COVID itself, I don't know. I don't know. The past presidency was more of an issue for me than COVID. I mean, I'm so glad that's over. But COVID, since I work at home and I process what happens in the world through working, I've been working like a maniac, really. I was able to finish some pieces that I had in process, and I did some new work it's been really good. I hate to say that because I know COVID's been bad for a lot of people, but I live in a little bubble, right? I have a house. My husband's still employed. I'm comfortable.
I hear this very often in the creative industries. Like, I mean, in some ways it's been, again, I hate to say it, but like, it's been nice because it's given us time and space away from other obligations.
But I really feel for performance artists and musicians and even glass blowers. A lot of, glass blowers, they work in community facilities and they haven't been able to work. I understand it's been tough for a lot of people. It's weird times.
Have you noticed any difference in sales?
Lately, things have been down. I mean, at the beginning of COVID, I did really well. 2020 was a great year for me, and mostly through my own website, which is even better because then I don't pay commission. And lately, it's leveled off. I mean, people are uncertain about what's happening, right? Because the numbers are going back up and down and weird. I just wish people would get vaccinated, though. That just bothers me. It's like the numbers say that the people who are dying now are the ones who aren't vaccinated. And
that's
right
such
there.
a shock. Like,
yeah.
Wow.
But it's become a political thing. It's just, okay, don't get vaccinated. You can die. I don't care. I mean, I hate to say that, but
it's kind of the truth of the matter. Like, if you don't believe in medicine, then you're probably going to die. Like, that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be blunt about it, but that's it. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. So, yeah, I keep hoping COVID's over, but it's not over.
No, we here in the Czech Republic literally today just got a new state of emergency instigated because we literally have our highest numbers of the entire pandemic now.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So this wave is the worst wave we have ever had. Which is ridiculous because we've got vaccines. I don't understand why this is still happening. Right.
Well, Seattle's been pretty good. I mean, our governor has been instigated a lot of shutdowns and was very
well. And you all are a liberal hub. I mean, I would assume there's good vaccination rates up there.
Right, there is. But still,
non-liberal hubs.
Yeah, yeah. It should never have been made a political issue. That's
agreed.
Public health. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about something else.
Agreed. Yes. I grew up in Washington, D.C. So there are two topics I generally try not to talk too much about, which is politics and religion. And that's because I grew up in Washington, D.C. and because my father's a minister. So.
Oh, you're one of those lucky children.
I am a PK. Yes.
Every minister's child I knew was the most out of control. I'm not judging you. You might not be in that category at all.
I have gotten this my whole life. No, it's fine. Within my family, I was the good son.
Okay. Good.
But that just tells you how bad my brother was because I was a drug addict and toured around with rock and roll bands as a roadie and did all kinds of lost my drive. When I was 16, I got my driver's license and my driver's license was taken away from me by the time I was 16 and 2 months.
Oh,
because
nice.
of
Well,
reckless driving, speeding, accidents, like all kinds of yeah. So like I was a horrible kid, rebellious, outrageous, but still the good son in comparison to my brother.
yeah. And you survived. You
I did. I did. I didn't. Yeah. I mean, yeah. We'll see how all the drugs affect me later in life. But at this point, it's just, yeah, it's fine. So, yeah. Any topics you want to talk about?
let's see. We kind of covered a lot. I don't have any particular topics. I'm happy to be an artist. It's weird, but I'm definitely not encouraging anyone else to be one unless they absolutely can't be anything else. There are a lot of creative fields now. There's a lot of opportunities for creatives in computers, and filming and gaming is really big here. All the people who design games. I mean, being an independent artist is just, I don't know, it's just really a ridiculous career.
Well, but that was also one of the things that I was fascinated by when I decided to do this podcast, which is that like everybody thinks when somebody says, I'm going to art school, you think you're going to be an artist. But many of those people that go to art school end up doing all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, they do the weirdest jobs. I know one person I graduated from my MFA program who's now a mortician. Like, great,
I bet his clients look beautiful.
I would imagine. I believe this person was a painting major. So yes, I would imagine this person does a very good job of doing that. So like the thing about like you go to law school or medical school, like that's a pretty straight line that you have chosen. But like getting any sort of creative arts or anything like this kind of degree is not a straight line. It's going to take you wherever. Like I know people that do like window displays and things like this and they got their masters in art. And there's so many careers that the only option is not being an artist, but you could be creative and find a creative avenue that doesn't necessarily hold all of those tropes of like this, the horrible artist lifestyle.
I think every career is creative, and we've kind of taken a lot of the creativity out of it. When you go to school,
that's not true. My wife is an accountant. There is no creativity in her job.
I don't know. There probably is. You're just not seeing it. But she can go home and she doesn't take it with her, probably, right?
It is true. Yes, she is able to, like, at the end of at 5 p.m., she just shuts it off and it's done and doesn't worry or think about it, which is
I don't have that. I mean, that's the problem with having your work at home is I work all the time. I
you say problem, I say blessing.
Yeah. Well, it's a blessing as long as your friends and family are okay with that,
Well, like there was a time in my life where I didn't have the resources to do my work at my home. And so, and that was a tough time, where I had to use a community, whatever, or go to use some facilities or kind of things, or just needed more space or whatever. And so like there are certain industries that I think are really great because they don't need a lot of stuff. They just need like space and stuff like this. I mean, yours probably a bit more space intensive.
Yeah, I need a lot of stuff too. It's not just one, it's wax and mold making and glassworking. It's just a lot of materials and time. But I don't have a huge space. My studio is about 400 or 500 square feet inside, but then I have an outdoor space with my kiln and,
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I have a question for you though. So like I noticed you have a lot of places that you say notable collections. How were you able to get into these collections?
Well, I was in a teapot show, and the CAM Foundation, it's a husband and wife I think they're from California. They have a collection of 18,000 teapots and teapot related art. So that was just a fluke. They bought my teapot. I'm in Amazon's collection because I was an artist in residence at Amazon.
I was going to ask about that, but go on.
Yeah. So as an artist in residence, you have to donate a piece, and I donated a piece to them. this is a fairly new residency that they do. It was really great for me. It's like 10 weeks. I had to be in that work environment 2 days a week. And I hadn't been in an office, for years in an office where people were working. And it's just such a strange experience because at Amazon, it seems like they don't have desks. You'll see people on their computers on a bench in the hallway or in the lunchroom, or, they're kind of all over the place. It was good for me to do that. I did not actively seek out being in collections. It just kind of happened.
Well, but you just brought up something that I think is a sort of, again, one of those sort of things that we don't talk about in the arts world. Like I've got things on my, in the collection of kind of thing on my CV. And what everybody thinks is that those pieces were bought, like that collection sought you out.
Oh.
And oftentimes in reality in the arts world, it means that the artist had to donate something to them in order to put that on their CV.
So I have a bit of both, right? The teapot was bought. The Amazon was a donation as part of I did get $10,000 for the residency. So, you could
say, that was paid for.
It was paid for. It's a mix. Sometimes it's okay to donate your work. If it's going to be in a popular collection, most people are not going to see your work ever. But if it's in a collection, they might see it, right? I trained myself to take my own photographs because first, I'm cheap. I didn't want to have to carry my heavy glass to somebody and have them photograph, for $100 or $50 a pop. I realized early on that most people are never going to see the artwork. They're only going to see the photograph. And you have to take at least decent photographs because that's what they're going to see. And it's been really good for me because when I take photographs, even though my photographs are, you being a photographer, I know you could nitpick their problems with them. It's been good for me because I learn about my work as I'm taking photographs of it. What's the best angle and what, makes me think about, why did I make this and what is this about? And it makes me take the photographs to try to relay that in the piece.
These days, I mean, that's 100% true. Is like the documentation is generally what people are going to see because, of course, websites, social media, all these other sort of outlets, very few people are ever going to see our art in real life, but they will, virally spread around images of our works throughout the internet. And so
for good or bad, right?
I hope not for bad.
Well, people copy. That happens. Or they see an image and they don't realize it. And then it comes out in their work and I don't worry about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't worried about that in a very long time. There was a time that I worried about that, but
websites are really important. I would recommend your students that they get a website early on. My husband's a computer person and he wanted to get my domain and get a website, 20 years ago. And I said, what do I need that for? Seriously, I had no idea where the future was going to. And I thought, you're just getting in my way. I just want to make my work and don't. But it turns out that that's how people find you.
Oh, yeah. My big advice when it comes to that kind of stuff is always buy your name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I didn't when I was younger. Well, I bought my proper name, MatthewDoles.com. I bought that. No problems. But of course, most people know me as Matt Doles.
Right.
But some drummer in Iowa is named Matt Doles.
Imagine that.
I know. It's just totally ridiculous. And so he owned MattDoles.com for 13 years. Now, he had his drumming in Iowa thing for 3 years of that, but he just owned it for 10 years and did nothing with it, but he wouldn't let me buy it. Finally,
because he's an artist too. He thought he'd get back to it, right?
Well,
but you have it now.
I have it now. After 13 years of putting it on back order every year, I finally have it. So now I own
Congratulations.
both Matt Doles and MatthewDoles.com.
Yeah.
I am very sorry to Matt in Iowa, but, got to be tenacious.
Yeah. I really think art is about communication, right? And you have to communicate. If you're going to work in a little room, then don't get ticked off when nobody buys your work or nobody finds you. That doesn't work that way. You just have to get your work out there. And a website is an easy way to do that. It may cost you money, but even just a page that has your picture or a picture of your artwork with a web address, a way to contact you, it's just essential, I think.
It is, but it falls into the character of putting up a web page with just pictures and no text won't make it so that search engines find your website. So there's that balance of having to make a beautiful website, something that's evocative and pretty. It could just be a full page thing that's a beautiful picture, but if you don't have any text on it, the search engines will never find you. So that nature of the fact that we as creative people, not only do we have to make beautiful things, but we also have to find the right keywords and text to put on our website for search engines. Such a fucking pain in the ass.
That's why I say it's a ridiculous business model, because we're everything, right? If you're an independent artist, you are the creator, the manager of content, the marketer, the web person, everything. You're everything. You're the business manager. You pay the bills. It's like
inventory, shipping.
Right. Shipping. Oh my God, shipping. Don't get me into shipping. That's just, shipping glass especially is really annoying. Because it has to be packed so well, and then it's expensive, and you have to
insurance. Fuck,
yeah, I have business insurance. I'm trying to do this the right way. I have a business license and business insurance, and it's crazy. But I wouldn't change it for the world. It'd be nice if I was making enough money I could hire people to do those things, but it doesn't make sense at this point. I'm never going to want to be making so much work that I'm not making it myself. That part is important to me. I don't want to have my work produced in China or Taiwan or North Carolina, wherever. I don't want, I just want to make it myself, which means I just have to take it as it comes, right? And
lovely. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Matt.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the conversation. We would appreciate it if you would share this podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, studio mates, anyone with an interest in the arts and creative endeavors. The building and strengthening of the arts and creative community is at the core of our mission for this podcast. They can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are produced by 5014. The audio was edited by Mickey at CushAudio Services, and the music was created by Pete Bybee. As we all know, funding for the arts is incredibly important, and you've got to support and appreciate it when you have it. So I'd like to give appreciation and a thank you to the EEA grant from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, which has been supporting the Wise Fool Art podcast for the past year. They are working in an effort to work together for a green, competitive, and inclusive Europe. We would also like to thank Hunt Kastner in Czech Republic and Kunstsentrene i Norge in Norway. Links to EEA grants and our partner organizations are available in the show notes or on our website at wisefoolpod.com.